Welcome to the debate. You know, when you break a bone, an X-ray gives you this clean white line. It's a binary answer, broken or not broken. And that's comforting because it's visible, right? The doctor just points to the screen and the problem is neatly categorized.
Right, but human psychology is never that simple.
Exactly. When you step into the world of internal trauma, that X-ray machine completely breaks down. Today, we are looking at a piece of material often dismissed as just a straightforward, tragic cry for help. Specifically, we're talking about Linkin Park's Nobody Can Save Me from their 2017 album, One More Light.
Which was a massive, highly debated shift in their sound at the time.
Oh, absolutely. And what if the way we've been reading this text and listening to this track is all wrong? The central question we are wrestling with today is one of underlying intent. Does this song represent a deliberate, mature artistic statement about self-reliance and taking control, or is it a raw, desperate documentation of an emotional breakdown, a signal of inescapable internal pain?
Yeah, and that's the core of it.
Right. And I argue that this track is a structured, contextualized narrative of personal agency. By looking at the lyrics and the band's intentional shift to a polished, upbeat pop and electronic production, we see a protagonist evolving from a state of helplessness to one of profound responsibility. It's a controlled artistic choice.
I believe the upbeat electronic rhythm and the lyrics about finding solutions merely serve as a fragile facade. The true meaning is leaking out through the raw emotion in Chester's vocal delivery, exposing deep-seated psychological pain and total isolation.
Well, let's lay out the foundation of our positions then. When I engage with this text, what fundamentally strikes me is the clear, logical progression of an individual diagnosing their own psychological state. If you look at the architecture of the lyrics, the speaker starts in confusion, searching outward. But then they arrive at this realization, been searching somewhere out there for what's been missing right here.
Which is a heavy realization.
It is. In psychology, there's this concept called locus of control. It's essentially where you believe the steering wheel of your life is located. When you have an external locus, you think the ocean is driving the ship. You wait to be rescued. Shifting to an internal locus physically changes how you process trauma. You realize you are the only one who can grab the wheel.
Grab the wheel, sure, but...
And the text maps this exact shift. Moving the focus inward to right here is the definition of a mature realization. Plus, we have to talk about the context. In 2017, the band made deliberate, technical choices to adopt this bright, pop-oriented sound. They wanted to reach a broader audience with a mature message. It's a map out of the darkness scored to a triumphant pop arrangement.
I see the logic of mapping it that way. I really do. But you cannot ignore the foundational imagery and, more importantly, the vocal texture that absolutely saturates this track. It entirely contradicts any genuine sense of control. Right from the opening minute, you have this airy, floaty vocal quality.
Which sounds peaceful to me.
Does it? I hear detachment. And then the lyrics come in with phrases like, dancing with my demons, hanging off the edge, and watch the ground give way. These are violent, destabilizing metaphors. If you are hanging off an edge while storm clouds gather beneath you, you're in free fall. The upbeat pop rhythm is just playing in the background while the speaker plummets. It's a terrifying realization of complete isolation.
But they are recognizing that isolation in order to overcome it.
But listen to the voice. When he sings, "Nobody Can Save Me Now," the vocal fry, the breathiness, it betrays the pop production. It isn't newfound independence. It is a statement of doomed fact. The missing right here isn't a cure. It's an acknowledgement of an empty void.
I hear that, but let's examine the mechanics of how the speaker responds to that void. Specifically, let's look at the shift in the chorus and the outro. For the majority of the text, the refrain is, "Nobody can save me now." It acknowledges a lack of external salvation, but the crucial structural shift happens when the text moves definitively to "Only I can save me now."
Yeah, but you have to...
I see this as an incredibly empowering artistic choice. The protagonist is accepting the hero's burden. It's an assertion of agency. They aren't just giving up to the vertigo you mentioned. They are stepping up to save themselves. And the intense pop production swells right there to support that victory.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. You're stripping the agency away from the surrounding lyrics by isolating that one phrase. You have to look at the immediate context surrounding that specific shift to only I. The full line is, and I don't want to let you down, but only I can save me.
Right.
The inclusion of I don't want to let you down completely changes the emotional valence. It shifts the mood from a triumphant victory lap to a heavy, guilt-ridden apology. And listen to the breathiness in that exact delivery. The voice actually thins out. This isn't liberation, it's a crushing burden.
How does apologizing negate their realization of self-reliance, though?
Because it reveals the motive. The speaker is essentially saying, I know you want to help, I know my inability to be healed is hurting you, but you can't do this. They're trapped in an illusion. They explicitly state, I chose a false solution. This isn't a triumphant hero claiming their destiny. It's someone realizing they've backed themselves into an inescapable corner. The polished electronic beat is literally just a mask for the tragedy of feeling like a burden to the people who love you.
That's a powerful read, but I have to push back on the idea that recognizing a false solution equates to being trapped. To recognize that you chose a false solution requires clarity. It requires a level of cognition that is way above mere panic. You have to step outside of your own behavior to analyze it. If this is purely an expression of defeat, and the music is just a fake facade, how do we account for the active, combative stance of the speaker deliberately chasing out the darkness inside?
Let's look exactly at how they are doing that. Let's explore that key line. I'm holding up a light, chasing out the darkness inside. You're reading those as triumphant actions.
I mean, grammatically, they are highly active, intentional verb phrases. Holding up, chasing out. The speaker is not surrendering, they are fighting back. When you are lost in a cavern, lighting a torch is the first step of survival. It aligns perfectly with active coping strategies we see in cognitive behavioral therapy. And musically, the driving rhythm underneath that line propels the action forward. They are doing the work.
I understand the instinct to view that light as a beacon of survival, but have you considered the environment in which that light is being held? You have to contextualize that action against the psychological collapse happening simultaneously. The speaker says, storm clouds gather beneath me. They mention a head-first hallucination, and they literally say, watch the ground give way.
Metaphorically, yes.
But I want to offer a different way to look at this. Think about actual physical vertigo. When your inner ear fluid gets disrupted, your brain genuinely believes the room is spinning, even when your eyes tell you it's still. Watching the ground give way isn't just a metaphor for sadness. It describes a cognitive state where your foundational sense of reality has betrayed you. Holding up a single light while experiencing that isn't a victory.
It's an attempt, though.
It's a desperate, futile coping mechanism against overwhelming odds. The active verbs holding, chasing represent an attempt to maintain a facade of control, much like the pristine pop production, in a situation where the speaker actually has none. The voice is trembling while the beat marches on.
I see the gravity of the vertigo analogy, but let me offer a different perspective on the ground giving way. The ground giving way doesn't necessarily mean physical destruction or ultimate doom. It can represent the necessary disillusion of the illusion the speaker mentions earlier, stared into this illusion for answers yet to come.
Right?
When an illusion shatters, the ground gives way. The false foundations crumble. When anyone experiences that ground-giving way moment, whether it's the realization of an addiction or the end of a core relationship, the first instinct is to find a flashlight. Holding up the light in that exact moment isn't futile. It's the only rational response to discovering your previous reality was a head-first hallucination. You illuminate the truth, however terrifying it is.
But what is the truth that they are illuminating? The truth is, nobody can save me. If the dissolution of the illusion leaves you entirely alone with your demons, that light is just illuminating the walls of a trap. Let's think about the phrase head-first hallucination. Diving head-first implies a willing surrender to unreality, a mind that finds its actual situation so intolerable that it prefers the illusion.
Yes, but they actively state a desire to leave it. They say, I want to fall wide awake now.
And that brings me to the very next line, which contradicts this whole idea of waking up and taking charge. You mentioned they want to fall wide awake, but look at what immediately follows.
Tell me it's all right. Tell me I'm forgiven tonight.
Ah.
This is repeated throughout the text. If this song is truly a mature, controlled, artistic statement of self-reliance, why is the speaker begging an unnamed external figure for permission to feel okay? Tell me it's all right. That is a raw leak of emotional desperation, and you can hear it. The vocal fry is so prominent there. A truly self-reliant protagonist wouldn't need that external absolution. It completely contradicts the only I can save me narrative.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. You know, the line, "Tell me I'm forgiven tonight," is the one piece of this puzzle I genuinely struggle with. I admit, the desperation in that phrasing and the vulnerability in the vocal performance is hard to ignore.
It sounds like a plea.
It does sound like a plea. Still, if we look at the causal relationship between wanting to wake up and asking for forgiveness, I think there's a mechanism of healing at work. I want to fall wide awake now. You tell me it's all right. Tell me I'm forgiven tonight. Falling wide awake is the key here. The speaker wants to exit the hallucination. They want to face reality, and asking for forgiveness is an integral step of clearing the ledger.
Clearing the ledger?
Exactly. Waking up from the hallucination requires facing the reality of the false solutions you chose. If your false solutions hurt others, which we know they did, because the speaker explicitly says, "I don't want to let you down," then seeking forgiveness is a profoundly mature acknowledgement of the collateral damage of your pain. It's not about asking someone to fix you, it's about taking accountability so you can begin the arduous work of saving yourself.
I hear your logic there, but it assumes that falling wide awake is a state they actually achieve. The lyric is, "I want to fall wide awake now." It's a desire, not a completed action. They are still in the hallucination. They are still hanging off the edge. And the juxtaposition of "I want to fall wide awake" with "tell me I'm forgiven" suggests the forgiveness is a prerequisite for waking up. They're paralyzed.
I wouldn't say paralyzed.
They cannot save themselves until someone else grants them absolution, which brings us right back to dependency. It's an inescapable cycle. The pain is internal, but the permission to heal is external. And since the core thesis of the track is "nobody can save me," that permission is fundamentally unattainable. It's a closed loop of despair, masked by an electronic beat.
Let's pause and look at the spatial disorientation in the text, because I actually think it proves my point about the structural logic of taking control. You correctly noted the line, "storm clouds gather beneath me," which implies the speaker is elevated, perhaps falling. But consider how the text maps out location psychologically. Searching somewhere out there versus what's been missing right here.
Yeah, the inside versus outside.
Right. When we talk about the spatial mapping of the psyche, we mean the mind is literally assigning physical locations to emotional states. Out there becomes this mythical place where the cure lives, the doctors, the friends, the external solutions. Right here is the uncomfortable physical body where the pain actually resides.
Yes, the spatial mapping is undeniable. But look at what occupies the space right here. Demons, darkness. It's not a sanctuary.
No, it isn't a sanctuary. I never claimed it was. Mature self-awareness is rarely comfortable. But recognizing that the darkness is inside and not out there is a necessary paradigm shift. If you believe the problem is out there, you are perpetually a victim of circumstance. The moment you acknowledge the darkness is inside, you claim jurisdiction over it. You cannot chase out what you do not own.
Claiming ownership and being consumed by something are two very different states. I agree they locate the darkness internally, but let's evaluate the success of this chasing. They say they are chasing out the darkness inside because nobody can save me. The causality there is vital. They aren't chasing out the darkness because they feel empowered to do so. They're doing it because they've exhausted all other options. Nobody can save me. It's a last resort.
But they're still doing it.
And frankly, the song doesn't give us any evidence that the chasing is successful. Listen to the bridge and the outro.
Wait, the bridge is the strongest piece of evidence for my side. The vocal intensity there, as the song reaches its climax, is a masterclass in a controlled, powerful pop performance. It's a technical peak. He is belting out this realization with full force.
Is it controlled, though, or is it straining under the weight of the emotion? Because if you listen closely to that climax, the voice, there's this undeniable vocal tear. It fades out on the repetition of the struggle.
Only I can save me now, chasing out the darkness. It ends on the search, not the resolution. If this were a definitive statement of taking control, we would see a structural resolution. Instead, we see a psychological loop.
I have to disagree that a structural resolution is required to demonstrate agency. The ongoing nature of the struggle is precisely what makes it a mature thematic statement. The text isn't a fairy tale. It doesn't suggest that realizing only I can save me magically makes the demons disappear. The maturity lies in accepting that the chasing is a continuous, perhaps lifelong process. The repetition at the end serves as an anchor.
A mantra or an obsession? Let's examine the phrase, answers yet to come, and the false solution to see how deep this feeling of helplessness goes. The lyrics say, stared into this illusion for answers yet to come. I chose a false solution, but nobody proved me wrong. That last clause is absolutely fascinating. Why does the speaker care if someone proved them wrong?
Well, because they are contextualizing their past mistakes. They are acknowledging that they made a poor choice and no one stopped them.
I think it goes much deeper than just contextualizing. I think they care because they are utterly desperate for intervention. Think about how people use destructive coping mechanisms in the real world. They chose a false solution, acting out, self-sabotaging, and they were secretly hoping someone, anyone, would care enough to stop them, to prove them wrong. It highlights the profound isolation I've been talking about.
Like the bystander effect.
Exactly. The bystander effect applied to mental health. They were crying out for help, making bad choices in plain sight, and nobody stepped in. It's an indictment of their surroundings and a profound source of their internal pain.
That interpretation makes a lot of sense. But consider what it means to actually internalize that realization. Nobody proved me wrong is the final shattering of the external expectation. It is the realization of the indifference of the universe. If you choose a false solution, there isn't always a safety net or a guardian to stop you. You have to correct it yourself. This is the exact catalyst for the shift to, only I can save me. The isolation is the crucible in which self-reliance is forged.
A crucible implies something stronger emerges. I argue that what emerges is a fractured psyche burdened with immense guilt. You keep sidestepping the duality of the outro. If the I that emerges is so strong and self-reliant, why is it immediately apologizing? The realization that nobody proved me wrong isn't an empowering philosophical breakthrough. It's a crushing confirmation of their worst fear, that they are fundamentally alone.
I'm not ignoring the apology. I actually think the apology, I don't want to let you down, is the strongest evidence of empathy and connection in the entire text. It proves the speaker is not entirely lost in narcissistic despair. They are highly attuned to the impact their internal struggle has on others. It is entirely possible to accept the burden of saving yourself while simultaneously mourning the fact that this truth causes pain to those who wish they could save you.
Even if they hold the key to their own cell, the text strongly suggests the lock is jammed. Let's go back to I want to fall wide awake now. The use of the word fall there is incredibly telling. Normally we say snap wide awake or jolt wide awake. Fall wide awake suggests that even the process of returning to reality is a loss of control. Every verb, every directional indicator, hanging off, ground giving way, falling, points to gravity taking over.
Or falling wide awake is a beautiful paradox that speaks to how we actually process panic. To fall is to let go of the edge. You mentioned they are hanging off the edge. Hanging is exhausting. Anyone who has fought off a panic attack knows that fighting it often makes it worse. Sometimes the only way out is through. You surrender the illusion of external salvation to truly awaken to your own reality. It lands you on the solid ground of self-reliance.
But they explicitly say, watch the ground give way. There is no solid ground to land on. That's the ultimate tragedy.
Well, we are approaching the end of our time, so let's synthesize our positions. I have argued that Linkin Park's Nobody Can Save Me is a deliberate, empowering journey. Through intentional pop electronic production choices and a clear lyrical evolution, it maps the protagonist's journey from seeking external salvation to actively claiming internal responsibility. The realization that only I can save me represents a mature claiming of one's own psychological agency.
And I maintain that interpreting this track as a journey of empowerment
fundamentally misreads the overwhelming evidence of emotional freefall. The upbeat music is merely a facade. The lyrics are a poignant, raw portrait of a mind overwhelmed by its own darkness. And the breathy, trembling vocal signals expose that truth. Self-reliance in this context is just a tragic articulation of inescapable isolation.
Despite our differing perspectives on the ultimate trajectory of the speaker, I think there is a significant point of convergence here. We both acknowledge that the material masterfully captures a profound internal struggle.
Absolutely. Whether you view the polished production as a triumphant vehicle or a tragic mask, the cartography of the psyche here is undeniably vivid. It captures what it actually feels like when the mind turns on itself.
And we also agree on the central realization of the material. External forces are inherently insufficient to heal internal wounds. The song forces us to confront a really uncomfortable truth. There is no knight in shining armor coming, and we have to figure out what to do with that.
It does. The nobody in the text is absolute. The disagreement is simply about what happens to the human psyche when it is left entirely alone with that terrifying truth.
Exactly. And exploring that very tension, examining both the structural logic of the lyrics and the raw emotional signals in the vocals, deepens our appreciation of the text's complexity.
Indeed. The friction between intention and emotion is what makes the track endure.
We will leave it there for today. We don't need to declare a winner, as the true value lies in holding these multiple perspectives simultaneously. We encourage you to return to the material and explore it further. But as you do, remember our starting point. We began by talking about how an X-ray can give us a clean, binary answer. But when you dive into the diagnostic muddy waters of the human mind, there are no clean lines. Sometimes the only thing you find is a person standing in the dark, holding up a single light, waiting to see if the ground will hold.